In Module 2, Lesson 18, we're going to explore the least common multiple and the greatest common factor of two numbers. A reminder, the greatest common factor of two numbers is the greatest whole number. Notice the term whole number, which is a factor of both A and B. In other words, the biggest whole number that goes into both of the numbers. On the opposite side is the least common multiple, and the least common multiple is the smallest or least whole number, larger than 0, which is a multiple of both A and B. So to make sure that we're clear about that before we start the exploratory challenge, we need to look at the greatest common factor. And our example numbers are 12 and 18. So we're going to list the factors as pairs so that we don't miss any along the way. 1 times 12 So the factors for 12, we have 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. Factors for 18 are 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6, and that's it. The greatest common factor would be the largest number that is in both sets. 1 is in both sets, 2 is in both sets, 3 is in both sets, 4 is not, 6 is in both sets, and 12 is not. So the largest number that is in both lists is 6. Our GCF for 12 and 18 is 6. Using the same numbers, 12 and 18, we're going to find the least common multiple. Now, multiples are larger. So the first 10 multiples of 12, I'm going to suggest to you that perhaps 10 is a lot of multiples. 12 which is 12 times 1. 12 times 2 is 24. 12 times 3 is 36. And we'll do one more. 12 times 4 is 48. Please notice the multiples of 12 start with 12 and get larger. Factors are smaller than the numbers. The multiples of 18, we start with 18. And 18 times 2 is 36. And 18 times 3 is 54. And we're going to stop there because if we're paying attention, we already know that there are two numbers on the list already that are in common. And we are looking for the least common multiple. So in this case, we're looking for the smallest number that is in both lists. And we find that 36 is the smallest number in both lists, which means that our least common multiple is 36. Our exploratory challenge is being completed mostly in class. It is a group activity, but I'm just going to talk through the different challenge activities in case you are working on it at home. Exploratory Challenge 1 is the factors and the greatest common factor. And you'll complete that in the same way that we did the greatest common factor earlier on in our examples. Greatest common factor of 12 and 18 we made the factor pairs and we found the largest number that was on both sets, which was a 6. So the same thing will be true in Exploratory Challenge 1. You'll be assigned a set of numbers. You'll make factor lists for that set of numbers and find the smallest number that is on both lists. In the second part of Exploratory Challenge 1, you will have a word problem that you will then complete using the greatest common factor as well. Make sure when you are completing your word problem that you actually answer the question they ask as well, because greatest common factor problems usually involve more than just finding the greatest common factor. For example, in question A, there are 18 girls and 24 boys who want to participate in a trivia challenge. If each team must have the same number of girls and boys, what is the greatest number of teams that can enter? And then a second question, how many boys and girls will be on each team? So to answer the first question, you are going to find the greatest common factor. The greatest number of teams is the greatest common factor of 18 and 24. When you find that greatest common factor, to find out how many boys and how many girls will be on each team, you'll need to divide the number of girls by the greatest common factor and the number of boys by the greatest common factor. So in your answer for the second question, you will have some number of boys and some number of girls, and it won't be the same number of boys as girls. Exploratory Challenge 2 are multiples and least common multiple. And so you will do the same thing with a pair of numbers that we did in our example 2. We listed the multiples and we found the smallest number that was on both lists. After you complete that part, you will have a word problem that you'll complete as well. And you'll be finding the least common multiple and make sure that you answer the question, all of the questions that are asked. Exploratory Challenge 3 is using prime factors to determine the greatest common factor. So you are going to be finding the greatest common factor, but instead of just making a factor list, you're going to do the factor tree, the prime factorization of the two numbers. Once you have done the factorization, you are going to list all of the factors for the first number on the left in a Venn diagram, and all of the factors for the second number on the right. Any numbers that do appear on both lists should go in the middle section where the two ovals overlap. And when you have more than one number in that overlapping section, to find the greatest common factor, you multiply them together. You will then also complete a word problem and answer that as well. Finally, in Exploratory Challenge 4, you'll be doing one of these problems, but the goal of these problems is not to get an addition answer. The goal is to split these numbers up by finding the greatest common factor and rewriting the sum using the distributive property. As an example, if I were to use the two numbers 35 and 42, the greatest common factor of 35 and 42 is 7. So I would then rewrite each of those numbers as a multiplication problem. 7 times 5 is 35, and 7 times 6 is 42. So we've split these numbers into factor pairs. Then we can rewrite this by taking the 7, which is a common factor of both of them, and putting it outside of the parentheses and multiplying that by both 5 and 6 inside the parentheses. And that is the distributive property. So for your pair of numbers, you will do the same type of thing by factoring out the greatest common factor and rewriting the sum in the distributive property.